Welcome to the SCORE Business Showcase. I'm your host, Steve Geyer, and my co-host is Marianne Coche. And today's guest is Cliff Ennico. He's been in business now for about 40 years. He's a lawyer, and you'll find him very interesting and very exciting. So I can't wait to get this started. And I have my first question for you, Cliff. Uh, you are a lot of things. And like we talked earlier, I thought you were a comedian, and people will see that on the interview. But Cliff, first and foremost, you're a lawyer and who
Yeah.
works with small businesses and entrepreneurs. What made you decide to become a lawyer?
Well, thanks, Steve. I mean, my wife says I'm a legend in my own mind. It's true. I have done a lot of things. And when you say that I'm a lawyer, you got to be careful about that because when you use the L word, the temperature in the room tends to drop like 10 degrees. Lawyer, boring. It's what people loves to hear himself talk, that kind of thing. I try to blow that stereotype out of the water. I really try to do that every day in my practice. But being a lawyer was not my first choice. I got to be honest with you. I believe it or not, when I was in high school, if you could go back to, I grew up in Yonkers, New York. I wanted to be a nuclear physicist, believe it or not. That was my goal. I wanted to be an atom scientist. And I picked the right college. I went to Dartmouth, which at the time had like the premier math department in the country. John Kemeny, who worked on the Manhattan Project with Albert Einstein, was the head of the math department at Dartmouth at that point. That was why I went there. But I made a very strategic error, and it's a great lesson for people. I've actually given talks about this, as you know. It's the little stupid decisions that you make in your teens and 20s that have incredible repercussions in your life sometimes. A little decision that didn't mean anything to you at the time puts you on a path that leads you to where you are today. I am where I am today because I didn't take calculus in my senior year of high school. Now that sounds like a dumb thing, but I was a good math student. I always got A's in it. I had a brain for it. But I skipped calculus in my senior year because the teacher who taught calculus wanted you to take a second class with it on statistics and business math. And that second class conflicted with fourth year Spanish. And I wanted to keep my foreign language because I wanted to exempt out. Every college back then had a foreign language requirement, and I wanted to exempt out of that. So I didn't want to lose my language my fourth year. So I figured, I can skip calculus. I'll take every college has freshman calculus. I'll take it when I get to college, right? So I did. I went to Dartmouth, big math department. I signed up for freshman calculus, and I walked into a room of 200 young men. Dartmouth was all male at that time, all of whom had had calculus in high school and were looking for an easy A because they were pre-med. And I struggled. I never got B's in a math course in my life, and I had to struggle for the first time to get B's and C's. And after 2 semesters, I decided I just can't compete with these people. I'm out of my league here. I'm outgunned and I'm outclassed. And I did not have a plan B. I really didn't. I wanted to be this physicist type person. So I kind of thought about it, and I said, well, I am kind of an intellectual. I don't want to be a professor, though. I don't want to live I want to live in the real world. I don't want to be somebody who just floats around all day thinking about, philosophical theories or something like that. I want to have at least one foot in the real world, but I also want to have something of a scholarly part of what I do. I want to be in a profession where I can write books if I want to. And the law was a just perfect fit for that. So it's a long-winded answer, but kind of a fun way of how your career sometimes takes you on very strange pathways sometimes. And just that little decision not to take calculus has made me what I am today. If I had taken calculus, I probably would be, I don't know, some kind of a scientist or something like that. I don't know.
Well, it sounds like you are meant to be where you are. What would you say made you decide to help small business owners?
Well, believe it or not, I owe that all to SCORE. I have been doing SCORE presentations now for 40 years. My dad, who was a banker in Yonkers, New York, retired back, I graduated law school in 1980, and he retired from banking at about the same time. And, he became a score counselor in Westchester County, New York, right across the border here. And one night he needed someone a speaker on basic business law. And he figured, oh, Cliff, he's a Wall Street lawyer. I was working for this big Wall Street law firm, working 100-hour weeks. He'd be a perfect fit for this. So, I went, and because I was happy to help out my dad, and I went up there and I gave a little talk about, corporations and partnerships and, back then. And I'll never forget it. We opened the floor to Q&A. And the first question I got was from this young fella who said, Cliff, very interesting talk. I operate a junkyard up in Mount Kisco, New York. And here's my question. Can I deduct my dog as a guard dog? What are the IRS rules for that? And I got to tell you, my jaw dropped open. Now, here I was, this Wall Street lawyer, master of the universe, that kind of thing, three-piece suit, the whole bit. Not only did I not know the answer to that question, I didn't know any other attorney who could answer that question. It woke me up to the fact that small businesses have their own particular set of legal challenges. And in the car going home last night, I said, you know what? I've always wanted to work with entrepreneurs, but this is nature's way of telling me that there's this whole body of small business law, and very few good attorneys are doing this kind of work. So that's really what got me interested in this, finding the answers to those kind of questions. And by the way, I can tell you today, if we have time at the end of the show, I'll tell you how you can deduct your dog as a guard dog. It's taken me 40 years, but I finally got the answer to that.
Now, was it easy to make a transition from Wall Street lawyer to small business advocate?
Yeah, that was one of my biggest challenges, Steve. I did work on Wall Street for about 10 years, and then I went off on I didn't go directly off on my own. I was of counsel to a small firm in Southport, Connecticut for a couple of years. And then I did go out of my home, and I've been working out of my home office ever since 1996. But there were two ways in which it was a very, very big challenge. Number one, I was used to having a lot of support staff. When you work for a big Wall Street law firm, I had minions working for me. I had people that would, word process documents for me, that would handle the library. If I needed a library book, I'd call the librarian, they would bring it to my office. I didn't have to move basically from my desk, all day. Now I was in a situation where if the copier jammed at 3:00 in the morning, the night before a closing, I was the one who had to deal with that. I had to learn how to fix paper jams, which I learned is a very incredible skill. You got to have that when you work for yourself. I had to learn how to be independent, but also too, it's very different at the small business level. When you're working on Wall Street and you work for big companies, everything is an economic decision. But when you work with small businesses, personalities get into the picture in a very big way. People's emotions getting. When I'm working with a client that has started a software company and he's now looking to sell it after 20 years, this is his baby. He's grown up with it. It's part of his family. It's part of his family history, his family culture. This is not just an economic or a business decision. This is a life decision that this person is making. I always tell people that if I only got paid for the legal work that I do for clients, I'd starve. I would. When you work for small business owners, you are not just their lawyer. You are their accountant. You are their financial advisor. You're their Svengali. You're their psychologist. You're their mommy. Sometimes you can't just limit yourself to the business side of what you do. You have to get involved in the personalities as well. If you ever see me in a bar with a client, of course now with COVID we're not doing this, but if you ever see me in a bar with a client on 11:00 on a Saturday night, we are not discussing business stuff. There are other things going on in this person's life that I'm dealing with. But I love it. I'll be honest with you. That's the part of it that I find amazing. It's the personalities that really make this. It's not the technical side of, well, should you do a stock sale or an asset sale?
Yeah, that really shows. It does, Cliff. What would you say that are some of the most common legal problems that you handle for your clients?
One of the things I love about what I do, Marianne, is that you can be a generalist. I'm not the kind of person who can shoehorn himself into a very tiny box. I've never been that way. I'm one of those people who likes to look at, 50 different things and maybe 5 feet deep, on each one. And this practice really gives me a chance to do that because it's a little bit of everything. My clients cannot afford to hire specialist attorneys every time they have a new question. I have to know at least a little something about employment law. I need to know a little something about antitrust law. I need to know a little bit of something about contracts. I mean, I do a lot of contracts for people. That's probably the heart of what I do. But I have to know a lot of different areas of the law, just enough that I can answer all my clients' questions. So, for example, when Obamacare came out in 2010, I didn't have to read all 600 pages of the Obamacare regulation. The only thing I had to know, I knew all my clients were going to be asking me one question, which is, how do I calculate the 50 full-time equivalent employees so that I know whether I'm required to offer coverage or not? So that section of the regulations I zeroed in on, and I made sure that I knew everything about that. But all the other 480 pages, I didn't have to read any of that because none of my clients are offering gold-plated insurance programs for their clients. They're just not. Many of them don't even offer it all to their employees. So that's what I mean by that, and that's a challenge because it's a constant learning experience. But basically, I'm mostly a contracts lawyer. That's really what I spend a lot of my time doing, is helping them with contract works. I do help them with the corporate side of things, their meetings of shareholders and all that kind of stuff. I do a lot of work in the technology space. A lot of them are high tech. They're doing software, they're media companies, they're internet based. I do a lot of like web documents for them and help them develop their distribution strategies for the software products that they do. But I also represent a couple of delis, and things like that too. It's really all over the place.
Now, have we discussed about books? Because you got 16 books going on. How did that happen?
Well, again, it's funny how things happen. When I was starting out on Wall Street back in 1980, one of the partners at the firm that I was working for had committed to writing a book for the New York State Bar Association, and he had fallen way behind on his deadline. They were threatening to revoke his membership if he gets a manuscript soon. So I'll never forget this. He came into my office at about 9 o'clock at night, and he said, "Cliff, I understand you have a journalism background, right?" Which I did. I written for a newspaper between college and law school. I was a crime reporter for the Yonkers Herald Statesman from 1975 to 7. My claim to fame there was I actually got a piece of the Son of Sam story. I was the reporter who got into Son of Sam's apartment the night that he was arrested. And I wrote about what his apartment looked like. Oddly enough, it looked a lot like mine at the time. So I think all single males of a certain age, their apartments look the same. I just think that. But that got me some notoriety. But that was before I went to law school. So he asked me, could you write this book? Can you help me write this book? And I said, okay, well, how far along have you done? And he said, really not, Mario. Well, when's it due? Well, they're giving me 30 days. So I said, well, okay, no challenge too big. What I need you to do, Mr. So-and-so, I need you to pull me off all other billable work. There's no way that I can do other work while I'm doing this. I'm going to need every minute of the next 30 days to get me done. Give me a co-authorship credit and I'll be happy to help you. And I basically did. I wrote a 600-page manuscript in 30 days. Is basically what I did. Well, it turns out that the head of publications for the New York State Bar Association had gone to the same college that I did. And he had some other projects for me to work on. So that's how I got into the whole writing game. And as things evolved, I started getting calls from publishers that were looking for special books on, like how the law affects you in certain ways. So bottom line is I now am the author of 16 books, and some of them are legal treatises. They're just for lawyers. But others are books for the general reader. In fact, my bestseller right now is a book on crowdfunding, how you can use the new crowdfunding rules to raise capital, for a startup business. And that's something of a bestseller right now. It's called The Crowdfunding Handbook is the title of it.
Excellent.
I want to learn a little bit more about that, Cliff. You mentioned your latest book, the Crowdfunding Handbook. Is crowdfunding really an option for small business owners?
This is something we're wrestling with right now. Crowdfunding in the United States is brand new. It's only been around really since 2016 that the SEC passed rules that allow it. Um, My answer to that is it depends on who you are. If you are a tech startup, if you're doing a technology company, it probably isn't a very good idea because the venture capital community kind of frowns on it. They don't like the idea that a startup company has 50 or 100 shareholders. They don't like that. If you do a crowdfunded offering as a tech startup, you're probably locking yourself out of a lot of serious venture capital later on. And a lot of people will tell you, don't do this. Don't waste your time on this. Wait a little bit, bootstrap it, fund it out of your credit on your credit cards for a while. Then let's go for real venture capital when you're starting to see some revenue coming in the door. That's what a venture lawyer like me will probably tell you. But there is a certain type of business for which crowdfunding is very, very good. If you have a retail or service business, the kind of business that doesn't lend itself to venture capital. I mean, no venture capitalist is going to invest in a restaurant. Okay, let's be very honest about that. But let's say that you have a restaurant and you've got 5,000 Facebook followers and 10,000 Twitter followers, all the people who propose to their spouses in your restaurant. You can, using crowdfunding, you can tap into that to raise equity capital for your business and not have to go for a loan. And I'm seeing a lot of this. The kind of companies that are availing themselves of crowdfunding are craft breweries, sing whiskey distillers. Liquor is very big in crowdfunding because these companies have a following. I'm actually working now with a rock band that you have heard of. Believe it or not, a classic rock band that's looking to raise funds to do a jukebox musical based on their music, on their catalog of hit songs. I mean, obviously Broadway's dark right now, but sooner or later it's going to come back, and they want to position themselves for that. And they've got 50,000 followers on Facebook. What crowdfunding does, if you have a business like that, where you have a large public following, you can tap into that and raise money from these people legally to fund whatever, project it is that you're doing. So for a certain type of business, crowdfunding is an option, but it's not an option for everybody. And it's something you have to think about. So that's what my book is all about.
Well, that's very interesting because you're a man of many talents. And one of them was you're a former reality TV star as well. Now, tell us a little bit about the Money Hunt show and how that all came about.
Well, this is what really turbocharged my career, Stephen, in a very big way. After 10 years of working on Wall Street, I decided, it was the recession of the early 90s, at that point, I looked at myself and I said, do I really want to be schlepping into Manhattan the rest of my life? I live in Fairfield County. My wife and I live in Fairfield, and we just decided, I'm tired of commuting. I'm sick of it. So I hooked up with a local firm. They let me rent some office space from them, and I just started building a practice. And one day I hooked up with this guy. He was a young, venture capitalist. He had just come out of Wall Street also. And we became friendly and we started speaking together. We started doing speaking gigs together to promote what we do. And one night we got caught in a snowstorm coming back from Boston. I'll never forget this. We got stuck on I-95, waiting for the snow plows to come through. We were off on the side of the road in his 4x4. And we started talking. We ran out of things to talk about. And we started talking about what would a TV show for entrepreneurs look like? Because what we do when we're interviewing clients and clients are pitching their ideas to us, this is very dramatic. There's a lot of drama in this. We could see a TV show. There's an entertainment value here. So a couple of weeks later, we pooled some money. We put in like $100 each, and we started doing a show on public access television in Norwalk Television called Money Hunt. And it was just, three people. There was me, this fellow, and a guest, basically clients of mine, people we knew. And we would just grill them on their business plan and tell them how we could do it better. Well, we ended up getting picked up by public television. And from 1994 to 2003, we did a show on public television called Money Hunt, which was the very first Shark Tank type show for entrepreneurs. It was the very first reality TV show for entrepreneurs. And it was because it was PBS, we couldn't do all the things that they do on Shark Tank, so we couldn't actually make an investment in the company, in the companies. But the idea was educational. The first half of the show, we'd have a guest on the show. It was a half-hour show. The first 10 or 15 minutes, we'd have a guest on. We'd grill them on their business plan, just like they do on Shark Tank. And then the second half of the show, we would bring out from behind a curtain the Money Hunt mentor, who was a leading figure in that person's industry. So let's say you had a little software startup from Boise, Idaho. My colleague and I would grill you on your business plan, and then out from behind a door would be Steve Ballmer from Microsoft. And he's been listening to all this, and he will now tell you what you're doing wrong, what you're doing right, and all this kind of thing. And we had some amazing people on the show. We had Jerry Yang, the founder of Yahoo. Keep in mind, this was the 90s. He was on our show a couple of times. We had Debbie Fields from Mrs. Fields Cookies. We had some of the top venture capitalists in Silicon Valley flying in. I mean, we really had the first Shark Tank concept. Unfortunately, when the dot-com bust happened in the early 2000s, we kind of lost all our corporate funding overnight. The show, I'll never forget, my colleague said, hey, Cliff, don't change your plans for the next few weeks. We're not going to be shooting this spring because all of our corporate funding disappeared. That's what happened. It's hard to believe now, but back in 2001, 2002, you couldn't give away an internet company. You couldn't give away a web company back then because of the dot-com bust. Things have definitely changed since then.
What an opportunity it would be for anyone to have been on that show.
Yeah, we kept in touch. I mean, I made a little lifelong friends out of that, and it's led to a lot of other things. I mean, I now write a syndicated column. I'm in a couple of hundred newspapers around the country. It's called succeedinginyourbusiness.com. That's the website if you want to look at it. I put it up for free every week, but I'm in about 200 newspapers around the U.S. and Canada, more in websites. I've spoken around the country. Up until recently, I had a relationship with eBay, where eBay would send me around the country talking to their sellers, their selling groups about tax compliance and the things you have to do to keep from getting sued when you're selling on eBay. Don't use somebody's picture of somebody else's stuff because you're infringing their copyright. A lot of basic stuff. The guard dog question, interestingly enough, came back at that because a lot of these people are selling out of their homes and they want to be able to deduct Fluffy. Their little lapdog Pomeranian. They want to be able to. One thing I say about people who sell stuff online, whether they sell on eBay or Amazon, these are people who are very creative when it comes to tax deductions. So I get all kinds of crazy questions about, is this deductible? Can you do this? Can you play this kind of game over here? It's really a lot of fun. And I love these people too. They're absolutely nuts. Some of my favorite people in the world are people who sell professionally on eBay and Amazon. They're wild and crazy folks. They really are.
Well, I really enjoy your humor, and you seem very, very approachable, Cliff. What would you say was maybe one of the funniest things that happened to you?
Well,
lawyer.
I have a lot of stories, and one of the hard things about being a lawyer is we have to keep everything our clients do confidential. So I have to watch out for things because I don't want to give away, who a client might be or anything. That's why lawyers are such terrible people at cocktail parties. We can't talk about anything, unfortunately. Of course, most of us are dull as dishwater too. Let's be very honest about it. But I try to break that mold. But I'll tell you the funniest incident, and this is without question. In my entire life, I used to represent a lot of dentists. I'm not a healthcare lawyer, but I would help them with the business side of what they do. So when they had to hire like an apprentice dentist, I would do the paperwork on that. When they bought and sold their practices, one of my very first clients was a boutique brokerage firm that bought and sold dental practices around New England. So I did a lot of their deals, and I'll never forget this. I was representing the buyer of a pediatric dental practice, a dental practice that focused on kids, and it was here in Fairfield County. I can't mention names, but we were going to have the closing at the dental office, and the other attorney on the other side was somebody who had gone to my same law school. And I was actually looking forward to meeting this guy. We were going to go and have lunch afterwards, after the closing. So we get to the closing, and the other attorney and I meet in the parking lot, and we're chatting. And all of a sudden, we hear this commotion going on inside the dental office, and we go running in, and our clients were actually pushing and shoving each other. Things were getting violent. And so we pulled these two guys aside. We got them to calm down. What's going on? What happened here? And it turns out that when my client showed up, the seller had a big fish tank, a giant 200-gallon tropical fish tank in his office. Remember, this was for kids, right? The kids love to wash the fish. And he was dismantling this thing. He wanted to take it with him. And the buyer said, no, that's coming with the practice. I'm buying that. That's part of what I'm buying is your fish tank. Well, we got them calmed down. Obviously, they hadn't read the documents that we had drafted. It was very clear the fish tank was going with the practice, no two ways about it. But so the seller said, well, wait a minute, that's not acceptable to me. Some of these fish I've grown personally attached to, and I'm not willing to sell them. So we said, okay, which are the fish? And my client was approached. Well, he wants to take a few fish. I don't care about that. Okay, so we made a list of these fish and the seller would not leave the room without taking these fish with him. So picture the scene. You've got this fish tank, this giant fish tank, two attorneys wearing three-piece suits. My friend, the attorney for the seller, is on his hands and knees with this list, trying to figure out which are the 5 fish that the seller wanted. And I'm on top of the tank with a net, trying to figure out, okay, now that's an angelfish. Is that Molly? Is that the one the seller wants? There's 3 angelfish. Which is the one he wants to take with him? The one with the scar on the fin? Okay. And the other attorney and I, we are biting our lips till they bled to keep from laughing at this, because our clients were taking this very seriously. This was a major thing. That seller was not going to leave the closing room without that bag of those 5 tropical fish that he'd fallen in love with. So we had to take this whole thing seriously. Although I will tell you, after the closing was over and after the money changed his hands, and he and I went out to the cut, both of us collapsed on our knees, and we just couldn't even talk for 5 minutes because we were laughing. Both of us were laughing so hard about this whole thing. But that's what I mean about personalities. People take this stuff seriously. If anyone ever told me when I was a young associate on Wall Street that one day my professional career would depend on my ability to identify 3 tropical fish in a tank, I would have said that that's utterly science fiction. That's utterly absurd. But that's the kind of life you have as a small business lawyer, and it's what I love about it. As I said, it's not the technical part about getting the deals done, although I do love solving problems. And the more I'm kind of known for taking on deals that other attorneys will not take on because they have unusual features or they're very complicated. But that's not the part of it I love. What I really love of it is the people and the personality and the crazy things that people fall in love with when they have their own businesses. Entrepreneurs are my heroes. They are, and they always will be.
From your point of view, Cliff, what have you seen that SCORE has done to help the small businesses?
Well, SCORE is an amazing resource. I am a friend of SCORE, and I have been for 40 years, since my dad introduced me to the organization. I have to tell you, I always, whenever I'm dealing with someone who's starting out for the first time, and I kind of feel that they're floundering around and they need an education in basic business concepts. Well, I could certainly help with that, but I'm expensive. Let's put it this way. And most of these people can't afford, to have me spend a couple of $100 an hour to have me educate them on the difference between accounts receivable and accounts payable. SCORE is a tremendous resource when it comes to education in this. And I always refer people to the SCORE organization. And I will tell you, in 40 years, not once has someone come back to me and said, oh, this was a waste of time. These people are too basic. This is, I've never had that experience. And almost always they come back and say, okay, they found me a counselor. The counselor doesn't always get what I'm doing, but I'm getting something out of this, Cliff. I'm at least getting the sense that I'm not going to make any really stupid mistakes because of this. Let's face it, at a certain level, all businesses are the same. All service businesses especially are the same at a certain fundamental level. And that's what SCORE does, I think, better than anybody else in the country, is helping people to get to a point where they know enough about business that they can survive. And it's an incredible resource, and it's free. which a lot of people don't get. They say, wait a minute, they're not charging for this. Someone's going to spend like, 15, 20 hours, talking to me about my business and you're not going to charge. People don't understand this. It's an amazing resource. And we're very lucky in this country that we have something like this. I mean, I'm now starting to do stuff internationally with other, entrepreneurs, organizations in other countries that don't have a score like organization. And it's a real, when it's not there, it's a real essential part of the U.S. infrastructure
Yeah.
for small business.
I thank you very much, Cliff. Thank you for that tag. And also thank you for joining us. This has been
My pleasure.
the Score Business Showcase, and continue in your success.